welcome everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you all so much for being here with us today. My name is Celeste Mayfrin-Swango, and I am the State Director with Environment Oregon and Environment Oregon Research and Policy Center. And I'm really excited about today's webinar, Electrifying Your Home, How to Ditch Gas and Electrify Everything. And this webinar is part of our Solutions to Climate Change webinar series. We have done webinars like this one on rooftop solar and one on electric vehicles, which are both posted on the Environment Oregon Facebook page for those of you who may be interested in checking those out. I'll also be sending out a recording of this webinar to everyone who RSVP'd and posting it on the Environment Oregon Facebook page so that you can go back and reference some of the information that's being presented today, so you don't have to feel like you need to take really copious notes. And I want to extend a really big thank you to our co-hosts for this webinar, Electrify Now, OSPIRG Foundation, Safe Cities at Stand.Earth, and US PIRG Education Fund. So here's the agenda for our webinar today. So I'm going to start with just a big picture overview on why electrifying our homes is so important. And then I'm going to hand things over to Matt Casal from US PIRG Education Fund to talk about the dangers of gas stoves and some of the alternatives like induction stoves and cooktops. And then we will hear from Brian Stewart from Electrify Now about the benefits of heat pumps and heat pump water heaters. And then we have several homeowners on who have either recently ditched their gas stoves, installed heat pumps or heat pump water heaters, and some who have done it all. So we have David, Jane, Pete, Melody, and Anne, and of course, Brian and Matt here to answer questions about the process and the benefits that they've experienced. So at any time throughout the presentation, please feel free to ask questions using the Q&A function on Zoom, and we'll try to get your questions answered as we move through the program. So why electrify your home? A greener, healthier world requires each of us to do all that we can to eliminate the pollution and practices that are warming the planet and changing our climate. And to get there, Oregon and the United States must move toward meeting our energy needs with 100% renewable energy like wind and solar. And that's going to require that we get the most out of every bit of energy that we use and that we stop burning fossil fuels, including in our homes and commercial buildings. Buildings are second only to transportation as a source of climate pollution here in Oregon, responsible for 34% of the state's total greenhouse gas emissions. There are almost 140 million housing units in the United States and 5.6 million commercial buildings. 3 out of every 4 American homes uses fossil fuels directly for space heating, water heating, and appliances. So the direct burning of fossil fuels accounts for more than half of all energy used in homes and at least 34% of all energy used in commercial buildings. And these tens of millions of housing units and millions of commercial buildings will eventually need to be electrified. Wind and solar power are rapidly replacing dirty fossil fuels like coal as leading sources of our electricity, and our grid is only going to get cleaner and cleaner. In 2021, the Oregon legislature committed our state to getting 100% of our electricity from clean sources like wind and solar by 2040. So as our electricity grid becomes cleaner, replacing the direct burning of gas, heating oil, and propane in our buildings with electricity will reduce pollution of our air, land, and water from fossil fuel production and use. Now, new and improved technologies are putting clean, efficient electric space heating and water heating and electric appliances like stoves within the reach of most households. And in fact, President Biden is signing the Inflation Reduction Act in about 25 minutes, which will also make these technologies even more affordable for a lot of Americans. And Matt and Brian will talk about those incentives in just a minute. And this is really great news because analysis shows that electrifying the vast majority of America's residences and commercial spaces by 2050 could reduce net greenhouse gas emissions from the residential and commercial sectors by about 306 million metric tons of carbon dioxide in 2050. So for those of you who are not climate scientists, that's the equivalent of taking 65 million of today's cars off of the road, or roughly 16 times the amount of cars that are registered in Oregon. So it would be a significant reduction in our climate pollution. And today's electric technologies can meet nearly all of our home and business energy needs, and often do so at a competitive cost and with a fraction of the pollution caused by fossil fuel combustion. So let me just wrap here by saying, we all kind of know, right, here in Oregon, we are already experiencing the impacts of climate change with more extreme weather events and heat waves, prolonged wildfire seasons, record-breaking drought and coastal erosion. And the past few years have been a real wake-up call that we need to do all that we can to reduce the pollution that's causing climate change. And though a lot of that change is driven by policy, there's so much that we can do as consumers to reduce our impact, including ditching gas and electrifying our homes. And not only does that help reduce climate pollution and our dependence on fossil fuels, it can also improve your family's health and safety and overall quality of life. It can help you use less energy and have lower utility bills, get the most out of the energy that you do use, and the peace of mind that your hard-earned dollars are going towards solutions. So let me stop there. And with that, I'm going to hand things over to Matt from US PIRG Education Fund.
Thank you, Celeste. I'm going to share my screen. Right. How does that look?
Looks great.
Great. Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining today. Excited to be here to talk about electrifying our homes, one of my favorite things to do and to talk about. My name is Matt Casal. I'm the Environment Campaigns Director with US PIRG Education Fund. We are an independent, nonpartisan group that works for consumers in the public interest, research, public education and outreach. We serve as counterweights to the influence of powerful special interests that threaten our health, safety, or well-being. This is me in this picture talking on TV about how much I love my electric stove, so you know that I am a true convert. Okay, so I'm going to talk today a little bit about the practical and policy solutions to gas stove pollution. One thing we know is that a lot of Americans love their gas stoves, but there is a hidden danger seeping out of them, and that's air pollution. Cooking with gas can produce air pollution levels indoors that would exceed outdoor standards. That means doing something as simple and innocuous as making a meal can release pollutants into our homes that some studies show lead to the development of asthma, especially in children, and may worsen symptoms for those with pre-existing respiratory illnesses. One report from Australia even compared the effects of using a gas stove around kids to those of secondhand smoke exposure. So certainly, we know hooking our homes up to gas poses a climate threat. It also can pose a significant threat to our own health. If you do have a gas stove in your home, this is no time to panic. You don't need to run and rip it out of the wall right now, although we'll talk about ways that we can get there. There are steps that you can take to protect yourself and your family in the meantime, but they're not perfect solutions. So next time you are in the market for a stove, I would consider going with electric or induction. In the meantime, some things you should do is make sure you have proper ventilation in your kitchen. It's best to use a ducted vent hood. Means your unit actually vents outside rather than circulating the air inside. Use it every time you cook, not just when you burn something. To the extent possible, only use the back burners, which are more likely to be captured by the vent. Open windows or doors to allow air to circulate. Get an air purifier that can help with particulate matter. You could also buy a low-cost portable plug-in induction hub, which is basically just an extra burner or two extra burners that doesn't run on gas, which you can just plug into your wall and use in lieu of your gas stove whenever possible. So some ways to protect yourself if you have a gas stove. But ultimately, we shouldn't have to go to all these lengths just to make sure that a product that we've purchased legally and installed correctly isn't pumping pollutants into our homes. I'm calling this slide policy solutions, but it's really about the bigger, broader changes that we need to protect people from indoor air pollution and move our society off of fossil fuels like methane gas and toward renewable energy and electrification. These are things that governments should do, things that manufacturers and retailers should do in order to make sure people are protected. First is that we can and should adopt health-based indoor air quality standards and ventilation requirements for gas stoves. We shouldn't allow products to be sold or installed in homes that will exceed health-based standards and that don't meet strict ventilation requirements. We should also require gas stoves to include warning labels so people know what they're getting into when they purchase one. Because electric and induction stoves run on electricity and not gas, they are more energy efficient. We should also provide local, state, and federal incentives for kitchen electrification. We'll talk about some brand new federal rebates in a minute, which will be effective in about 20 minutes when the bill gets signed. And then also important to remember, we need to protect people who rent or live in public housing, people who don't purchase their own stoves. So we should require electrification in public housing, require landlords adhere to strict air quality standards, and provide incentives for electrification of rental units. And then ultimately, we need to phase out the use of gas stoves entirely. We can do that by banning gas hookups in new construction, a step many cities have taken, and which more cities are debating right now, and hopefully we'll see more and more of that in the future. Okay, so gas stove pollution, that's how I bring the mood down at every party I go to, or anytime I see my family and someone has a gas stove. Now I want to talk about some of the more exciting good news type stuff. Fortunately, we do have options, and they are really good options. I have an electric stove in my house and I love it. It has a quick boil feature. It's not as fast as an induction stove, but it does boil water really fast. And I do have 2 young daughters who are 2 and 5. They love their mac and cheese. And when I'm being heckled by a 2-year-old and a 5-year-old to get their mac and cheese on their plates faster, it's nice to be able to boil water fast. So that's one, side benefit. Well, electric cooking has come a long way. And so stoves like the one that I have are actually really nice and work really great. And there's no more of those coils that everybody used to hate. Induction cooking, I like to say, is the future here today. In fact, it's not that new, and it's been used in Europe for a long time, but it is newer to many people here in the United States. The technology is really cool and exciting. It's fast, efficient, and pollution-free. Induction cooktops use magnetism to heat metal cookware. When you turn on the stove, the electric currents underneath the smooth cooking surface creates a magnetic current within the cookware itself. So that means the heat is directly transferred to the pot itself. The stovetop actually doesn't get that hot. So that allows you to boil water faster. It allows you to have greater control over temperature. Lots of professional chefs actually are now adopting induction because of the precision and skill you can use with you get with induction. Some things to know about switching to electric or induction cooking. You may need to do electrical work in your kitchen if you don't already have the right outlets. So that's a consideration. And then while traditional electric stoves are often cheaper than their gas counterparts, the newer versions and the induction cooktops are often more expensive than their comparable gas counterparts. So price is definitely going to be a consideration. But as I mentioned, there's good news. The Inflation Reduction Act, which will be signed now in 15 minutes, depending on how long he talks before he actually signs it, by President Biden, could soon help you save money if you're replacing a kitchen appliance with an electric one. The bill includes new federal rebates and tax credits for bigger purchases, such as energy efficient heat pumps and electric vehicles. Those are some of the ones that you've been hearing a lot more about. But a lesser known provision allocates funding for states to provide rebates for the purchase of new electric appliances, including cooktops, ranges, stoves, and ovens. So for example, you could receive a rebate of up to $840 on a new electric cooking appliance, and up to an additional $500 if you're switching from gas or propane to electric. And then I mentioned you might need electrical work, which can be expensive. If you do need to upgrade your home's electrical panel in order to accommodate an electric range or any other electric appliance upgrade, the Inflation Reduction app can help you with that too. And you can get a tax credit of up to $4,000 for those expenses. So some really exciting new policies in the federal bill that can help. But certainly there are all of these things that we need to do both at the state and local level to continue to push it over. So for those of us who are already in the know and ready to electrify our homes, these new rebates are going to help. For some people who might have been on the fence, they're going to help. But to really get to where we need to go, we need those indoor air quality standards. We need warning labels. We need state and local efforts to move us toward electrification. And then I'll just end by saying, none of this is easy. Not only is it, it's a process to electrify your home, and there's a lot of considerations that you need to take. But so there's that sort of the technical and practical barriers, but then there's also the fact that we are up against a powerful and well-funded industry that's bent on selling more gas. The term natural gas is part of it, right? It sounds great. And so that's why we think it's really important to be talking about gas stoves and the potential health risks with gas stove pollution, because for so long, most of what we've heard about gas stoves and other gas appliances really is that they're efficient and they're great. When in reality, the situation is different, and the real environmental and health costs of cooking with gas and using gas in our homes is much greater than we've been told for a long time. But the alternatives are great. There are some new policies that can help us adopt them. And I think, we'll see more and more these technologies becoming the norm. And I think we're on our way to 100% electrification. Okay, and then I am going to pass now to Brian, and I'll stop sharing my screen.
Thanks, Matt. All right. Hello, everyone, and thanks for tuning in today. My name is Brian Stewart. I'm the co-founder of Electrify Now. We're a all-volunteer organization, and really our kind of reason to exist is to help people understand the benefits of electrification, just not only to cut carbon emissions, but to make, as Celeste said, your home safer and more comfortable. And we like to think of this, it's a systems problem that we've got. Our current fossil fuels based energy system is the number one reason that we're having these conversations about climate change. And so we like to think about these actions that we're about to talk about as ways that you can help build your little piece of the new clean energy system that we need for a sustainable future and just better lives altogether. The reason this is so important here is to talk Oregon specifically. 60% of the homes in Oregon use natural gas for heating. And we've all kind of grown up with this idea that natural gas is clean burning fuel. It's a marketing ploy from the gas industry. They're really good at this, but it couldn't be farther from the truth. Burning methane, which is what natural gas is, produces over 25% of US emissions, and that's just for using methane for heating. This doesn't include the methane that's burned for electricity. So heating our homes, our offices, our buildings, our industry is a huge part of the overall carbon emissions in the world. And it's also a huge source of indoor and outdoor air pollution. We tend to think about cars and coal plants and stuff as creating air pollution, but all of our gas burning devices, natural gas or methane burning devices, create indoor and outdoor air pollution. You may have been hearing from the gas utilities. Northwest Natural is really aggressive about this, talking about renewable natural gas as if that's going to fix everything. This is another marketing concept from the gas industry. There's some benefits to renewable natural gas, but it's just not going to solve the problem. The idea that we can just keep burning gas in our homes because it's going to be renewable is literally a pipe dream. And that's because at the very best, we could expect about 15% of the current gas use to be supplied by renewable natural gas. And it's expensive. It's like 2 to 5 times the cost of fossil gas. So the idea that it's going to just like be the silver bullet to replace our current dependence on gas for heating our homes is just not true. So it's important for all of us to get our brain around the idea that we have to stop burning methane as soon as possible. Reducing is great, but it's really about stopping our dependence on fossil gas. That's the answer. And it's in our own homes, the big culprits are our gas furnace and our gas water heaters. These two devices consume the vast majority of the energy in our homes and produce the vast majority of carbon emissions. Collectively, it's something like 5 to 11 tons, and this range reflects, the different sizes of our homes, the different energy efficiency levels of our devices, how well insulated our homes are, how much water we use. If you have teenagers, for example, you're going to be at the higher end of the spectrum here. But just to put this in perspective, an automobile produces 4 to 8 tons. So your home produces, if you're heating with gas, producing more emissions than an automobile. And I think most of us kind of get it that cars produce emissions, but it's more invisible to us, the emissions that come from our home. But it's entirely possible to have zero emissions space heating and zero emissions water heating. That's what we're going to be talking about today. And the reason that this is possible is because of a technology called heat pumps, which most of us are kind of unfamiliar with. And they can appear to be quite magical in the way they work. But I think for most people, the simplest thing is just to understand that we've had these devices in our homes for years. A refrigerator is a heat pump, for example. And the way it works is it moves heat from one place to another. So it's pumping heat. That's why it's called a heat pump. So in this case, it moves heat out of your refrigerator into your kitchen. So your kitchen gets slightly warmer, and inside that insulated refrigerator, it gets dramatically cooler. In fact, it can even make ice. And the amazing thing about this, so if you've ever put your hand behind a refrigerator, you've probably felt that hot air or maybe it blowing hot air from underneath. That's this transfer of heat from one place to another. And it's incredibly energy efficient and effective. I mean, even if your kitchen can be really hot, like last year during the heat dome, our kitchen was almost 100 degrees before we turned on the air conditioning, and we were still able to make ice in the refrigerator. So these heat pumps can deal with huge temperature differences and are incredibly efficient. The easiest of the two, space heating and water heating, is to get your brain around probably is the water heater, although in some cases they're the least familiar to us. This technology has been around for decades. It's just starting to get market penetration. It's something in the single digits in terms of new installations are heat pumps now, maybe as high as 10% in some places. We've had ours for years. They look just like regular water heaters, but the way they work is they move air across this unit at the top, moves air across a coil that has refrigerant in it. It absorbs heat from the air. Then that refrigerant is compressed, which increases the temperature content of the refrigerant, and then the refrigerant is pumped around through these coils around the storage tank to heat the water, and then that cools the refrigerant, and then it goes through that cycle again. And these things are insanely efficient, 3 times more energy efficient than any other way of heating your water, which is dramatic. So what that turns into in terms of operating costs is also very attractive. These are 3 typical systems: electric storage, which is the most expensive to operate. This information comes from the EPA, energy guide labels from the Department of Energy. Gas storage units are slightly less expensive to operate, and gas tankless are thought of as the most energy efficient, although they've got their own problems with emissions that we won't talk about today. But these are the 3 typical systems that you will see. A heat pump is dramatically lower in cost to operate than any of those. By far the cheapest way to heat your water, and by far the fewest carbon emissions per year. And this is just with standard electricity right out of the grid. If you speak average Oregon emissions levels, you can get renewable energy in your home. We've got tips on how to do that on our website if you go to electrifynow.net. And you can get 100% clean energy in your home today, literally, in which case you will have 0 emissions from your water heating. So I like to think of it, this is the way things look today, but because of these laws that Celeste mentioned, the 100% Clean Act here in Oregon, very soon it's going to look like this for everyone, but you can do it today by getting renewable energy through community solar and other methods. So heat pump water heaters are insanely effective, and we've got some great deals going on right now. This is from Gen Pacific. They're the distributor for the Rheem units and other models. You can get $1,000 off 50-gallon hybrid. They're often called hybrid electric water heaters, heat pump water heaters. $1,000 off. It'll be shipped directly to your home. You have to be a PGE or Pacific Power customer to qualify for this, but there's other incentives that are similar for other utilities around the state. You need to get a qualified installer. We recommend Great Northwest Installation. All of our information about contacting and all this kind of stuff is on our website, Electrify Now, on the Take Action page. And if you mention Electrify Now, Great Northwest will give you a discount on installation as well. So great promotion going on right now to take advantage of. It's important to know a few things about these devices. They're a little bit different than other water heaters. Their best location is in a basement, a garage, or a large utility room. And part of the reason for that is because they make a little bit more noise than a typical unit. If you have a power vent gas water heater, they're quieter than that. But if you have an electric water heater, they're noisier than an electric water heater. They're like a refrigerator, but you don't want this next to your living room, for example. They produce cool air because they're taking heat out of the space that they're in to heat your water. That's going to lower the temperature of the room by a couple of degrees. So again, you don't want that in your living space. They're slightly taller than conventional units. They need enough cubic volume of air around them to operate. 700 cubic feet is about typical. So, like a 7 by 10 room, something like that. And then they need 240 volts of electricity. If you've got an electric water heater now, that's no problem because your electric water heater also uses 240. But if you've got a gas water heater now and replacing it with an electric heat pump, you're probably going to need an electrician to come and run a new 240 line to the location where your water heater is located. It also needs a condensate drain. That's nothing to be concerned about. Gas furnaces have these, a lot of devices have these, but that is, the plumber can do that. It's no big deal. Total installation cost is going to run something like $2,000 to $4,000. It's going to be on the lower end of this range if you're replacing electric water heater, and towards the higher end if you've got a gas water heater, but it's going to be dependent on your situation. Go with a qualified installer. Don't just call any old plumber. Some of them will try to talk you out of it. We've got great information on our website about trusted resources, contractors, and discounts, so check it out. These things are amazing. They are going to give you the same water heating performance, the same hot water that you're used to. They're cheaper to operate, much lower, even potentially 0 emissions. And these things come with a 10-year warranty, which is a good sign of the confidence that the manufacturers have in this technology. A typical water heater is more like 5 to 6. So these things are not going to break, and it's not kind of squirrely technology. It's ready to go. So go for it. Let's talk about space heating. It's similar technology, but in this case, the condenser unit is outside and ambient air is pulled across that outside unit. They're typically shaped kind of these cube shapes like a air conditioner, or you can find them sometimes with side discharge. They're more suitcase shaped, but this is outside your home, and it's harvesting heat from outside and then consolidating that in refrigerant and compressing it to increase the heat value again, pumping it into the house. And then that refrigerant heats air, which is blown into the home. And the amazing thing about heat pumps is they can operate both directions for space heating. So it can operate as an air conditioner, but it can also operate to heat your home. The same device. You don't need 2 devices. And they're incredibly efficient, like we talked about before. You often hear this term COP, or coefficient of performance. And that's a ratio of the energy that you get, the heat energy. I think of it as BTUs of heat divided by the BTUs of energy that it took to produce that heat. And these things have a COP of 3, which means that you're getting 3 times more heat energy than the energy that you purchased to run your device. 300% efficiency. You know, just for comparison, for example, the most efficient gas furnace is like 0.95 efficiency. So this is over 3 times more efficient than the best gas efficiency, high efficient gas furnace you can find. The most efficient way to heat your home, period. They come in 2 different kind of configurations, and there can be combinations of these things, but to keep them simple, there's ducted systems, which provide heating and air conditioning. This is the best solution if you've got a gas furnace now in your home and ducting. So you can see there's this external unit we talked about. The refrigerant lines go into your house and into this air handler, which looks just like a furnace, which is connected to the ducts, which blows that warm air or cool air into your home. The great thing about these ducted systems is you can put really good filtration systems on there to filter out smoke and dust particles, anything that you don't want to be breathing. You can even put HEPA filters on there, which is increase the amount of filtration you get, which is really great for those smoky wildfire days. And these things can come with a backup electric resistance heat strips inside the air handlers for those super cold days, just to make sure that you are always warm and comfortable. We have that in our home, and we can see when they turn on. It's a few hours literally every year that they're called into service because the heat pumps are so effective. They also come in what's called ductless or mini split configurations, where you also have this external condenser unit outside, compressor condenser outside, refrigerant lines that go into your home. But instead of ducts, now you've got these what's called a wall-mounted head or mini split that's up on the wall, and this has a fan in it that's going to blow warm or cool air into the room. And so if you can get these that have multiple heads for multiple rooms. These are the best application for these devices are homes that currently have electric baseboard heating, or maybe you've got a gas furnace and one room is really cold and you can use this to make that room more comfortable, or you can massively reduce your reliance on gas heating by putting this type of system in the rooms that you occupy most, like your living room, your dining room, your kitchen, and then the other rooms can be heated with gas, and that can massively reduce the amount of gas heating that you use. They don't have as good a filtration options, but they're incredibly efficient. These are some of the most efficient heating systems that are out there. In terms of cost, this is the 3 typical systems that you see in terms of older homes. Some old homes still have oil furnaces. That's starting to be a bit rare, but some do, and it's incredibly expensive to heat your home with oil. This is the cost per million BTUs. That's just a kind of easy apples to apples comparison for the cost of heating. But you can see what that translates into annually for typical homes in Oregon. Very high cost for oil furnaces, also high cost for electric baseboards, which is why gas furnaces have been so popular. They're cheaper than either electric resistance or oil furnaces. And this is why so many homes swapped out into gas heating many years ago. But if you compare that if you're upgrading, you could upgrade to a high efficiency gas furnace and save more money because you'll get a more efficient system. Electric heat pumps are as cheap or cheaper than the most efficient gas furnaces. So if you're going from an older gas furnace, you're going to see a cost savings with a heat pump. If you've got a new pretty high efficiency gas furnace and you just want to do this to lower your carbon emissions, you won't probably see a huge savings in terms of the cost to heat your home, but you will be getting air conditioning for the same with the same system, and you will dramatically reduce your carbon emissions. This is what it looks like for the conventional systems, and heat pumps are dramatically lower than that. And again, if you've got renewable energy in your home, or even if you don't, if you install a new heat pump now, in its service life, it's going to be creating 0 carbon emissions because the electricity here in Oregon is trending towards 100% renewable really quickly. So again, cheaper to operate or comparable to the most efficient systems and massively lower carbon emissions. There are some important things to know. If you've got an older home, this is the same situation that Matt was talking about with induction stoves. If you've got an older home and your panel is a small 100 amp panel and it's full, you may need a panel upgrade, which can be expensive. It can cost $3,000 to $5,000. But doing that, if you're thinking about these other things like heat pump water heaters, heat pump space heating, solar panels, an EV charger, induction stove, you'll be happy you've done this electric panel upgrade. There's absolutely no reason to have a gas furnace backup with a heat pump system. Some installers may try to talk you into that. If they do, say thank you and call someone else, because you do not need that. Absolutely do not. Categorically do not need gas furnace backup. You will want to go with a more efficient unit. They're often called variable speed units. They're more efficient than single stage or dual stage heat pumps. So it's worth spending the little extra money to get the variable speed units. Get 3 quotes from installers. Don't be bashful about this. Get someone who feels like they're giving you good service. And one part of good service is someone who's inspecting the ducts to make sure the ducts in your home are working. If you've got a ducted system, make sure that they've checked the insulation to check to see if you might need to add a little bit of insulation somewhere. If they don't look at that stuff, you might want to go with someone else, because you want the person you're working with to be thinking about your whole house, not just the device that they're selling you. And then ask your contractor about the available incentives. They will know all of the incentives that are available here in Oregon. We're going to talk about the Inflation Reduction Act here in a minute, but all the other ones are the contractors are very familiar with that. There is lots of, I've gone through this really quickly. There's lots of information on our Take Action page on electrifynow.net. We've got trusted contractors that will give you a discount if you mention our name. And we have recorded webinars on all these topics. If you want to go deeper in this, all that information is on our website. So these things are going to give you heating and cooling with one system. You're going to feel more comfort because they produce more constant temperatures, more continuous air movement, which means more air filtration, which all of that adds up to no cold spots in your home and more superior comfort. And you can avoid 4 to 8 tons of carbon emissions with renewable energy. All right, so the Inflation Reduction Act is complicated and there's a lot of things that haven't been worked out, but this is some of the things that we know. There will be tax deductions up to 30% of the cost for energy efficient home improvements, up to $2,000. It might be more than this, but it's at the very least $2,000. It might be as high as $3,500 or $4,000. But this is the way that we will be able to get tax deductions for the costs that we incur for heat pumps, panel upgrades that we talked about, heat pump water heaters. If you're an income qualified family, there will be appliance rebates that are attached right at point of sale that can be as high as $8,000 per household, which is amazing on the cost of the equipment itself. There's also $500 million going into domestic manufacturing of heat pumps to supercharge the R&D in this area and domestic manufacturing, which will lower the cost of these units over time. This will take time until we feel it in the market, but it's really important long term to make sure that these things happen at the lowest possible cost. There will be an extension of the solar and storage tax credits up to 30% of those costs. The thing that is hard to answer right now is when exactly this will take effect. I think it's very likely that this will happen in a way that if you're for the 2022 tax year. So by the time we do our taxes in April of 2023, these things will be worked out. And I believe that it'll be the case that if you are doing the work this year, you will see those tax deductions available to you. But I can't promise that for sure. They will be available in the 2023 tax year. All right, so I hope this inspires you to ditch the gas. We've talked mostly about space heating and water heating. The same is true, as Matt mentioned, for induction cooking, but also for outdoor grilling. You can replace a propane stove or a propane grill or a barbecue grill, a charcoal grill, which creates crazy amounts of air pollution, with an electric grill, much cleaner, easier to maintain, etc. You can ditch your gas fireplace and put an electric one in. Your friends, you won't even be able to tell the difference. They also give you better temperature control, and you can even have the flame on without the heat if you like that. Sometimes I know with our old gas one, our living room got too hot. Ditch your gas lawnmower and your trimmer and blower and replace those with electric devices. All these things work better. So they'll give you better performance and comfort, massively superior air quality, lower your expenses, and easier to clean, maintain, and avoid, like we said, at least 5 to 11 tons of carbon emissions per year and more if you've got these other devices in your homes. And I would hope that all of us would aspire to actually cut the gas pipe to our home. We've done this in our house. Call Northwest Natural, they'll come take your meter away. They'll even cut the pipe at the street, won't charge you for that. That'll save you another $150 a year just for your hookup fees, and avoid methane leaks and help scale back the gas system, which is what has to happen on a large scale here in the United States. Like I said, there's tons of information on our website. Our Take Action page is organized like this. It's by topic, so you can go and click on any one of these boxes. It'll tell you exactly how to do these, whether you're trying to get clean energy in your home or install one of these devices. Tons of information there. And our website we try to keep it really simple. We have a monthly newsletter that you can sign up for, which is filled with tips and information on incentives and discounts. And also, like I mentioned, webinars on every one of these topics that you can see and watch them at your leisure. They're recorded, and you can find that information on our website. So that's it from me. Thank you very much, and good luck with all your clean energy projects.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Brian and Matt, for your presentations. So now we are going to bring our homeowners out to answer your questions about the process and their experience switching from gas and electrifying their homes. So let me introduce Jane and, sorry, one sec. Or if everyone could just come off of video onto video. And then if you have questions for Brian or Matt or any of the homeowners as we go through this Q&A portion, please feel free to use the Q&A function on Zoom or the chat function as well. So my first question, I guess, for you all is just, why did you decide to ditch your gas stove and get an induction or electric stove? So what factored into your decision? So David, I'm going to kick it over to you.
Thanks. Thanks for including me. And those are really great presentations. Thanks for those. For us, my wife and I both work on climate change in some fashion. My wife works on vehicle electrification. I work on climate campaigns. And so we're both sort of thinking about the system and trying to really change the system. But when it came to our stove, the health impacts, the indoor air quality impacts really placed some urgency on that for us. We felt like we really wanted to protect our kids. We have 2 little kids as well. And it was just something that really spoke to us as something that we needed to do quicker than, maybe we would have if we were just going to replace our stove when it conked out. So that was, I think, the biggest factor for the timing. But we want to get off of gas as much as we can and cut that pipe at the street, like Brian talked about.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Jane, same question for you. What factored into your decision?
I'm going to give you the long story, but shorten it. In 1962, my father had the advertising account for the gas company in Seattle, the one that put the flame on top of the Space Needle. So what I learned from my father over all those years was the influence of advertising. Fast forwarding to the time I met Brian down in the legislature, we were trying to get the Clean Jobs bill passed, and I could see the influence the gas companies had on the legislature and watch that thing be picked apart and diluted. And when it didn't pass, I went home to my owner-occupied duplex, and I was so angry that I thought, what can I do about this? Well, I have control of this building, and at that time, interest rates were low. And so I refinanced and electrified both sides of the duplex. I found a delightful contractor who helped me do that, got estimates as Brian recommended. They were all pretty close. and I was really happy with it. But I started the process mostly because I was angry at the gas company, and I'd gotten involved in climate legislation. It's been an absolutely marvelous experience. And I have had the pleasure of calling the gas company, politely asking them to cut off the gas. They told me that I might want to leave it connected to the house. I sold it someday, and I told them that wasn't going to be an option for the new buyer. So they cheerfully came and let me take photos of them digging up the street and cutting off the pipe. And I now am 100% electricity with heat, hot water, fireplace, and my induction range, which I would like anyone to give me a call, come on over, we'll cook together, because it is so much better than the gas. It's probably the place I've seen the biggest change, because my heat is still very regular and very lovely. I now have air conditioning, which I didn't have before, which has been really nice now that climate change is making our temperatures hotter. But that mostly I made the switch because I was angry and because I could, and I wanted power over something. So I was fortunate to be able to do what my friend refers to as the full stack house. And whether you do it a piece at a time or all at once, more power to you.
That's excellent, Jane. We'll definitely be coming over for dinner soon. Thanks for the invite. And I know that you are in the process right now of getting a heat pump, but haven't gotten it totally installed. Can you talk a little bit about what made you decide to do that in your home?
And it's nice to be here. And I agree, those were fantastic presentations. Thank you so much, everyone who's spoken. Yes, we get our heat pump installed in September. We're very excited. And a number of factors played into our wanting to do it. I also do work advocating for building electrification and other policies to combat climate risk and to promote local health and safety. But I've been worried about gas for a long time. I grew up in California, and we had a Northridge valve installed on our gas line here because I was worried about gas leaks with earthquakes. So we got one of those stopper valves installed. And then as I was learning more about the indoor air quality issues and the climate impacts, I kind of wanted to put my own money where my mouth was. I'm telling other people to pass these policies, to take this step. I wanted to see what it was like, and recognizing that I was coming into it with some privilege that a lot of people don't have, to be able to explore this. And so, and also we had AC already in the house when we bought it in 2007, which we thought was just really wild. And who has AC in Portland? And we didn't use it for years. And then that's not true anymore. Now we have to use it a little bit, at least every year. And it's a very old AC unit with really nasty coolant that you kind of can't get serviced or replaced anymore. And so rather than wait for that to conk out, it's let's do it. And it is the only gas that's been in the house since we moved in. And so once we get our heat pump installed, we'll be gas-free, all electric. And we're very excited about that. And one last thing I didn't expect is it will actually gain some usable space in the house, because the indoor air handler piece will be smaller than our furnace, and it won't need to attach to our chimney. So that was something we didn't know going in, but is a nice plus that lets us think about how to use some of the space that we'll gain. We weren't expecting that.
Awesome. Well, congratulations, Anne. That sounds really exciting. And then Melody, I know you also recently got your heat pump installed. How did you decide what type of system to go with, or the company and the style? Any tips for people who are going through the process right now?
Yeah. And I'm not a professional environmental activist, so I came at this with very little knowledge and did a lot of digging and researching. I think honestly, a lot of the reason why we chose the particular unit that we did, we got a ducted heat pump, was is what we could afford at that moment in time. My father had recently passed away, so we had a little extra money, and so we could afford that. I think the two most important things I want to make sure get out there when I was thinking about this, I want to pass these two bits of information along. Number one, we followed Brian's advice and got 3 different estimates when we were getting our heat pump possibilities sorted out. 2 of them were from mainstream heating and cooling contractors, And they both scared the good gracious out of me because they were like, heat pumps are terrible. You'll freeze to death. Like, it's a nightmare out there. And I've been really excited about this, but after talking to both of them, I was really freaked out by it. Then we talked to a third company that specialized in heat pumps, and they were like, no, this is actually not a thing. Like, this is no problem at all. And you'll be fine. And this is true. We had the heat pump installed 3 years ago, and we're fine. Like, it works great. Even when it's really cold, even when it's really hot, it's fine. So number one, I would say, watch out. Those contractors, especially more old school ones, will scare you with false, maybe old information. But it was so extreme that I wondered if there was some kind of, I don't know, something in it for them to keep pushing the gas furnaces. It was weird. So be mindful of that. And then the other one, I saw someone ask about the noise factor. Unfortunately, my mother-in-law got a heat pump, but she didn't, she wanted to do it independently. And she had a standard contractor install it, and they weren't very familiar with them. And so they installed a heat pump for her that's very loud. And you have to kind of actually raise your voice in her house to be heard. Whereas our heat pump is silent. I can never hear it. Even when it's working really hard, it's silent. So it's a really big difference in the noise of the unit. And if you have a contractor doesn't do them a lot, isn't familiar with the options, you might fall into the trap of getting a loud one. But just know there are very quiet ones out there. You just have to do a little digging and find a contractor who has skills with heat pumps.
Melody, if I can jump on that, I mean, your experience is so typical, and I experienced it ourselves too when we were electrifying our home, and so that's why we went to the step with Electrify now of having these contractors that we know won't try to talk you out of it on our website, because the worst thing to do is get excited about this and then call a contractor who's kind of the expert, and then they talk you out of it. So you're so right about the right contractors. We'll try to save people time by just doing this. But if the people who advertise and who are excited about it, if the salesman isn't excited about the heat pump, if he doesn't sort of say, wow, these things are great, you should not work with that contractor. You should say thank you and find someone else, because there are really good people out there who know what they're doing and who've been installing these things for years, and you will be happy if you work with one of those people.
Great. All right, just to go back to stoves again, David or Matt, can you talk a little bit about, and Pete, welcome Pete. Hold on, let me get you here. Just how does it compare performance-wise to your gas stove? And then there has been some kind of chatter online about like pots and pans compatibility and people being concerned they have to like replace their pots and pans. So maybe Matt, could you share a little bit about your experience using your induction or electric?
Yeah, well, yeah, mine's electric, and I think it's great. It's nice. It looks good, and it works really well. I'm not a chef, but we cook on it. I like it better than the gas around my kids, not only because I know that it's not pumping pollutants into our home, but also there's no open flame. Of course, the electric stove still does get hot. The induction stoves don't get as hot. So that would be even safer. On the question of pots and pans, so on the traditional electric stoves, you're going to be fine for the most part. It's the induction stoves where people are hearing that they'll have to replace all of their pots and pans and they can't. That's not true. Most pots and pans work with induction. Not all do though, so you do want to check. And there are sort of some easy ways to do it, and I pasted in here our induction stove guide in the chat earlier, which we have a whole section in there on pan compatibility. The idea is that because it uses magnetism to heat the pans directly, it requires cookware with a certain amount of iron. That's sort of the technical thing. So most popular models like stainless, blue, carbon steel, cast iron, ceramic coated, they all work with induction stoves. Some come with an induction logo now. Like it's like a little, well, you can see a picture of it in our guide. So you can check that. You can also, if you want to test to see if it'll work with an induction stove, put a magnet on it. If it sticks, it works. If it doesn't stick, you might need to you probably won't be able to use that pan on the stove. And then I'll say one other thing about trying it out. There have been a number of public libraries and other places across the country that are now stocking induction hobs. So like the one hot plate induction cooktops that you can plug in. We're trying to get more places to do that around the country. If you can find a place like that you can just check it out, you can bring it home, try it out, test out your pans, all of that. So there are definitely ways to try out the technology without having to go full on and buy the whole thing first.
Great. Anything to add, David? Did you have to replace all your pots and pans?
No, I think we had one cheap griddle thing that we couldn't use, which was not a loss. Every other pot and pan that we have works great, and we cook nearly every night, and we love it. Matt's comment about the water boiling. Yes, we have 2 little kids, and when mac and cheese needs to be made, it needs to be made quick, and it's amazing. I think I'm on this webinar because I tweet about my excitement about our induction stove so much that people said, hey, you should join this. So I love it. I cooked on it last night. We'll cook on it tonight. The other thing about the heat, it's going to be 100 degrees or something like that in the next couple of days. If we were cooking with gas, we wouldn't consider cooking in our kitchen during those hot days. It's way less of an issue with the induction because there isn't that flame residual heat going on. And it really makes a big difference in our kitchen. So we're really pleased on that too. And I love it. It's super fast. It's super responsive. We enjoy cooking on it and get excited about it every time.
I think what's nice about that too is that you have these like knock-on efficiencies that happen with that, because now that your kitchen isn't as hot, you're not taxing your air conditioner to cool the rest of the house. And on top of that, I think to quote a friend of mine from actually almost a couple decades ago who was using commercial induction burners, he was all hands down, these things outperform professional restaurant grade gas stoves. They boil water faster. Chefs love boiling faster. You have finer grain control. And especially like one of my favorite things to do is cook on an induction burner with my favorite choice of cookware, All-Clad. You get great control, great even heat, less burned food. I mean, who wouldn't want that? I mean, I'm not a huge fan of burned food. If you are, I don't mean to insult you, but that's just me.
Well, if you can believe it, we're at the top of the hour, which I'm bummed about because I could talk about this stuff all day. But I really appreciate you all being here for this webinar, for the fantastic presentations. And I am going to be sending out, like I said, a recording of this to everybody. And then there'll be some additional resources as well, some of which have been mentioned here. And I'll make sure to include David's Twitter handle so you can see all of his excitement about his induction stove every day like I do. But thank you all so much for being here. And again, this will be posted up on our Environment Oregon's Facebook page, along with the 2 other webinars we've done on rooftop solar and electric vehicles, to give you all the information and tools that you need to switch away from fossil fuels and help us solve climate change. So thank you all so much. I hope you have a good rest of your day.